welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. If you jump on here live tonight, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Give the video a like, a thumbs up, and if you have not yet subscribed, please do so. Tonight's going to be something that I've already talked about one time here recently, and even that day I talked about it, I said I'd probably have to talk about it again before the 2025 college football season starts. Good evening, Keveron. Glad to have you here. Marcus, glad to have you here. And today is that day, but it's still mid-February, so I might have to come back on here and do this again in case people forget before the season starts. But last time I talked about it was right after the regular season had ended, and there was still a lot of jobs that were open and a lot of shuffling and things like that. Well, now, for the most part, every team has found their new coach. So I want to go through and look at all the new head coaches at the FBS level in the world of college football. Now, there's 26 teams on the list, and in case you're wondering, it is alphabetical. So that's the reason why you're going to hear the teams where I placed them at, because I wrote this down alphabetically. So if you watched the last video that I did talking about all the head coaching changes, you'll know some of this, but as I said, there's been some changes since then. There was still a lot of jobs that were open back then, but I think now they're pretty much all filled unless we see other things happen that we don't expect between now and September. But Appalachian State hired Dowell Loggins, who was the offensive coordinator at South Carolina. And the reason why I paused there is because his name's confusing. Hey there, Raiden. Glad to have you here, because his name looks like Dowell, and to me it is Dowell. And when somebody has the last name spelled like that, it's pronounced Dowell. But I've heard a lot of people say Dole. By the way, Raiden, my name is Brandon. Thank you for asking. That's why the channel is called Ref Brandon. And then his last name to me should be either Logans or Logains. Hey there, Rob. Glad to have you here because it has an A in it. But they say it's pronounced Loggins, so I'll go with Loggins. But anyway, he was the South Carolina offensive coordinator. Now he is the head coach at Appalachian State. This past year, Appalachian State was not very good, and Appalachian State has a rich football tradition, and they're not going to put up with not being very good. Hey there, Bean Juice. Glad to have you here. Ball State hired Mike Uramovich, who was the Butler coach. And Bean Juice, I can't say your name because I don't know your name. All I know you as is Bean Juice. So all I can call you is Bean Juice, unless you would like to tell me what your name is. Otherwise, all I see on my screen is Bean Juice. I am doing fantastic, Rob. Thank you for asking. Hey there, Navy Camouflage. Glad to have you here. Central Florida hired a former coach that is now their new coach, Scott Frost, who used to be their coach, and of course, he left to go to Nebraska. That didn't work very well, so now he's back at Central Florida. And no, good or bear, I am not in Tennessee. I kind of wish I was. I love that state, but no, I'm not in Tennessee. And thank you so much for subscribing, Navy Camouflage. I greatly appreciate it. The more subscribers we get, it helps the channel out tremendously. I don't make any money doing this, so it's not for me to make money because I don't make a dime doing this. But it's because the more subscribers we get, the more will pop up on people's YouTube home screen. So the more homes we reach. And the more homes we reach, the more subscribers we'll get. So that's what I'm looking for. I promise it's not for me because I don't make any money doing this at all. Central Michigan hired Matt Drinkle, who was the Army offensive line coach. Charlotte hired Tim Albin. He was the Ohio coach. And by the way, for whoever made that comment, actually, to be honest with you, my forehead is not that big. It just looks big because when I sit here in this studio, I don't wear my hat because it's in the other studio. And I look so good, I don't need a lot of hair. So my forehead and my head appears to be big, but it's not because I hold the phone really close so I can see all the comments. If I hold it far away, I'm scared I won't see them. So since I have the phone so close, it makes my forehead look big, but I promise you, it's not that big. When I buy a fitted hat, which means they're supposed to fit, almost every one that I buy is too big for my head, which means my head is not that big. It just looks big. I've got a big brain, which makes my head look big. Hey there, JJ the Baller. Glad to have you here. And believe me, JJ, people can say whatever they want. I'm not thin skinned. It does not bother me at all. I'm blessed beyond compare, blessed beyond measure, blessed better than I ever deserve. So comments like that don't bother me at all. East Carolina hired Blake Harrell. Thank you for subscribing, JJ. I really appreciate that. Blake Harrell was their defensive coordinator. He took over in the middle of this past season when they fired their former head coach, and now he is no longer the interim coach. He is now the permanent coach. Florida Atlantic hired Zach Kitley, who was the Texas Tech offensive coordinator. And JJ, I'm glad you asked because you asking that question means I'm doing a phenomenal job of not showing my fanboyism on the channel. But you can see right there that I am a Clemson fan. But this is not a Clemson channel, and I'm not one of those Clemson fans that comes on here and it's all the time, go Clemson, go rah rah, go my team. I don't do that. I'm not a sunshine pumper, never have been, but I'm also not a Debbie Downer. I'm not one of those fans that thinks my team's going to win every game, but I'm not one of those fans that thinks my team's going to lose every game. I'm a realist, always have been, always will be. But there's several times that you can watch a video and I won't even mention Clemson at all. Matter of fact, I didn't bring them up tonight until you asked about them. But I not only am I not a bandwagon fan in college sports, but I'm not a bandwagon fan in any sport. Any sport that I follow, any team that I like them regardless and refuse to change. Fine example. In the NBA, my team is the New Orleans Pelicans, and they are absolutely atrociously awful. But I still pull for them. Florida International hired Willie Simmons. Now, Willie Simmons, back when I was a young man, used to be a quarterback at Clemson. But he was actually a head coach before with Florida A&M. But his most recent job was he was the Duke running back coach. It's always funny to me when people like Willie Simmons, who played quarterback but coached running backs. And thank you for the kind words, Rob. I hope I get there too one day. That was my hope when I started the channel. But I knew that when I started the channel a couple years ago, that since YouTube had been around for 15 years already, that I was kind of behind the eight ball and it was going to take me a while to get there. But I hope that I get there one day. And that's why I don't make any money on the channel right now, because I don't want folks to think that I started this channel to get rich off YouTube. That was not my intention. My intention was to have a platform to talk sports because I love sports and to have a platform where anybody that wants to come on here and not use vulgar language and not cuss like you're a 5-year-old child, but wants to actually talk logic and talk sports, whatever sport it is, we can all do that, and we can have fun doing it as mature men or mature women, and not call people names, and not ride coattails, and not cuss like you don't know what a vocabulary is, but just have fun. And that's why I started the channel. And I tell people all the time, JJ, that I'm the same way in real life I am on here. I'm not one of those people that gets on here and puts on a persona for YouTube. If you ever see me in person, I'm the same way in person I am on here. I'm also on Facebook. People can message me on Facebook, and I'm a busy, busy, busy man. So I might respond to you one time, and the next time I might not respond to you for 3, 4 hours. But I promise you, if you message me on Facebook, I'll talk to you on there as well. I have no problem with it. As long as people can talk like they're a mature person, I can talk to anybody, and I will talk to anybody. I don't think I'm better than anybody. I just love to have fun and love to talk logic when it comes to sports. Fresno State hired Matt Entz, who is the USC linebacker coach. You have a great day too, Rob. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. And yeah, JJ, I did. I actually made a video about it last night because 2 weeks leading up to the game, I said the Eagles would win the game. I thought they were the better team. To me, it was clearly obvious they were the better team. But I could have given out 20 score predictions, and I never would have thought it was as bad as it was. But I thought the Eagles were the better team. And I even made a comment on here that I didn't think the Chiefs would be able to stop and contain Saquon Barkley enough. But not only could the Chiefs not stop Barkley, they couldn't stop anybody else the Eagles had. The game was essentially over with at halftime. It's the biggest dud that I've seen in the big game. You know, for a while, usually the big game is always real close, at least for a while. That game was over in no time. And yes, JJ, I think they might have actually been there more than that. They've been there 5 times recently with the whole Andy Reid regime when they've won 3 and, lost 2. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't have the history in front of me. But I was thinking that right after the NFL changed its name to the NFL and become the NFL in the mid-'60s, that the Chiefs played for 1 or 2 big games back then and lost. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll go back and look later if I remember. But for some reason, I was thinking that when the NFL first started in the mid-'60s, that the Chiefs played for a big game or 2 when it first started, and then they didn't get there again until the Andy Reid regime started. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this was their first time ever getting there. Kennesaw State hired Jerry Mack, who was in the NFL as the Jaguars running back coach. Marshall hired Tony Gibson, who was the NC State defensive coordinator for many, many years. It'll be interesting to see now, how bad the NC State defense is, because Tony Gibson is one of the best defensive coaches in the game, and now he's the head coach at Marshall. If I'm not mistaken, he's actually from the Huntington, West Virginia area, and that's why he became the Marshall head coach. New Mexico hired Jason Eck, who was the Idaho head coach. And we all know that North Carolina hired Bill Belichick. Ohio hired Brian Smith, who was already on the staff as their offensive coordinator. Purdue hired Barry Odom. Now, Barry Odom's most recent job was the head coach of UNLV. Before that, he was the defensive coordinator at Missouri. And now he is the head coach at Purdue. And then Side Dish hired Scott Abel, who was the Davidson head coach. Sam Houston State hired Phil Longo. Now, Phil Longo was most recently the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin, but I hope for Sam Houston State it works out, but I don't understand the love for Phil Longo. Phil Longo has been around forever as an offensive coordinator, and I've watched his teams play, and then I have never been impressed with Phil Longo's offenses, but yet he's one of those coaches that every time there's vacancies, his name always gets brought up. But maybe I'm wrong because SMU hired Rhett Lashley, and Rhett Lashley, just like Phil Longo, was an offensive coordinator that, jumped ship from year to year to year to team to team to team. When we always heard about how great Rhett Lashley was on offense as a coordinator, but yet when I watched him coach his teams on offense, I was never impressed with any offense he ran. But yet SMU hired him, and he's done pretty good so far. So maybe Phil Longo will have the same success. Southern Miss hired Charles Huff, who was the Marshall coach. Temple hired Casey Keeler, who was the Sam Houston State coach. Tulsa brought in the coach from East Tennessee State, Trey Lamb. UMass hired Joe Haresmiak, who was the Rutgers defensive coordinator. And UNLV hired Dan Mullen. And I don't think I have to tell anybody who Dan Mullen is. And Utah State hired a name that all football fans in college should recognize, Bronco Mendenhall. Now, Bronco Mendenhall most recently was the head coach at New Mexico, which is why they had to go out and hire a new coach because Bronco Mendenhall left to go to Utah State. But Bronco Mendenhall is actually originally from the state of Utah, and he used to be the BYU coach, and I've never understood why he left there because BYU was very successful when he was their coach, and every time they had a good season, he was getting a raise. They loved him there. He was from the area. He chose, for whatever reason, to leave and go to Virginia. He coached there for 5 or 6 years, but he didn't like being on the East Coast, so he retired at a very young age, stayed retired for a couple of years, came out of retirement to go to New Mexico. Now he's back home in Utah as the coach of the Utah State Aggies. Wake Forest hired Jake Dickert, who was the head coach at Washington State. So now Washington State hired Jimmy Rogers, who comes over as the head coach of South Dakota State. And then lastly, we have West Virginia, who hired their former coach, who is back as their new coach, Rich Rodriguez. So that is a list of the 26 head coaching changes in the FBS level of college football. Any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. And for all of you that commented tonight, I greatly appreciate it. For those of you that said you subscribed, I greatly appreciate it. You help the channel out more than you will ever know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. I've just bought a Humpty Dumpty toy from Aldi. It's brilliant. It comes with Aldi King horses and Aldi King men. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.